Hi, I'm Iris Wilbur-Glick, president of Louisville Forum, and welcome to our November meeting. We typically meet on the second Wednesday of each month at Vincenzo's Restaurant in downtown Louisville, and all are welcome. Founded in 1984, the Louisville Forum is a nonpartisan public issues group that hosts debates and discussions of contemporary and sometimes controversial public policy issues that affect the greater Louisville community. For more information on the Louisville Forum, our programs, or to make a reservation, please visit louisvilleforum.org. Today's program, a recap of Kentucky's 2023 election and a preview of the 2024 election. Fresh off the presses, right? So Governor Beshear returns to the governor's mansion. Secretary of State Michael Adams has 4 more years. And then we have a new slate of other Kentucky constitutional officers. Here in Louisville, there were notable down-ballot races, including 3 Metro Council seats and family court. There was a projection of 45% state turnout at one point, and last numbers I saw maybe were about 38%. We'll get into more of that in just a moment. And pockets of surprises throughout the state as well. So be sure to fill out your question slips for our panel. We'll dive into those issues as well. So today, let's walk through what happened during early voting yesterday on Election Day and what it means moving forward. Will this influence or even predict Kentucky's voting behavior in 2024? What can we expect coming out of Frankfort with a continued divided government? Will the results of last night put some office holders on the national stage? What is the significance of last night's results to national parties and the upcoming presidential election? So let's dive in. We're fortunate to have 2 seasoned journalists with us today. Jack Brammer is a native of Maysville and has been reporting the news since 1976, mostly with the Lexington Herald-Leader's Frankfort Bureau. After retiring in December 2021, he became a freelance writer for various publications. It's a master's degree in communications from UK and a member of the Kentucky Journalism Hall of Fame. And also with us, Ryland Barton is the managing editor of Kentucky Public Radio, a collaboration of stations including Louisville Public Media. He's a frequent contributor to KET, and his coverage has been featured in NPR, CNN, MSNBC, the BBC, NYT, and the Washington Post. He grew up in Lexington, has a bachelor's degree from the University of Chicago and master's in journalism from the University of Texas. Please join me and welcome Jack and Ryland. So we typically do opening remarks, but we're actually going to go ahead and just dive right into some conversation so we can get to as many questions as we can. Friendly reminder, there's question slips at your table. After completion, just wave them and a board member will come by and we'll get to those in the program shortly. So Ryland, Jack, surprises. What were you surprised by last night's results?
A week ago, I thought I knew how everything was going to turn out, and it turned out the way I thought it. Last Friday, when a poll came out showing that the race between Daniel Cameron and Andy Beshear was tied, that really threw me for a loop. And I think what it did, I think it motivated a lot of the Democrats to say, you know, we can't be complacent about this. We've got to keep on working. I remember the 1995 election between Paul Patton and Larry Forgy. Forgy quit campaigning the final weekend, and some people say that cost him the election. So I think a lot of people were surprised with that poll, and then it turned out Election Day, the results came out to what had been expected, with Beshear a 4 to 6 point lead over that, and Republicans capturing all the down-ticket races.
I mean, I think the most surprising thing about the election is that Kentucky is this very, very Republican state. It's voted more and more Republican as time goes on, and yet, for some reason, keeps on electing this one particular Democrat to statewide office. And that's something I think we're all trying to figure out. Is this a Beshear thing? Is this a thing where he's just particularly successful in these statewide elections that nobody else has really been able to crack the code on in recent years? And I don't think we really have the answers to that yet. Looking at the map, some of the interesting things are just how well, sure, he ran up the board in Lexington and Louisville. You kind of had to do that in order for a Democrat to win in Kentucky, but he really did. He did that in Fayette and Jefferson, and also Northern Kentucky performed even better than he did in 2019. But then, and this is really well displayed. And to make a quick plug for our website, or one of them at least, Louisville Public Media's website, we got a map that we put out showing the direction of each county. So how many more Democrats, or how much more successful a Democratic candidate was in each county. And it's almost every county that they went towards Beshear, even if it ended up being a Cameron won that place. Beshear got more votes than he did in 2019 in the vast majority of Kentucky counties. A real surprise too is in southeastern Kentucky, and I don't know. There's a few conclusions that you can make about it, but 2002 floods, 2022 floods. He was there a whole lot. A lot of government aid also came flooding in, but also this is a historically Democratic voting area that, again, for some reason, decided to once again kind of return to voting Democratic. So I think more than anything, there's a lot of questions that are raised, and there's some hypotheses to make that I think we're still trying to test. But it was I think, fascinating election night.
A little factoid about the Beshear thing you mentioned. If Andy Beshear finishes this coming 4-year term, if he's not elected to the U.S. Senate or president, something else, that will mean that Beshear has been governor of Kentucky for 16 of the last 20 years. Yeah. So it is a Beshear thing.
Yeah. I kind of want to back up a little bit, Jack, though, what you mentioned, polls, right? And so, in recent memory, it seems that these polls they've been all over the map. Curious for both of your all's takes on the effectiveness, the relevance of polling, as sort of regular consumers, if you will. Like, what should we think of them moving forward?
Personally, I think not much. The polls, they're fun to look at and where somebody is at that stage. But I understand this poll that came out last Friday, the Emerson poll, the methodology was different from the way it had conducted earlier polls. And so maybe that inconsistency of how it conducted the polls was a factor. So I think, they say the most important poll is Election Day. And so I think that's very true. And I would just look lightly at polls.
Yeah, I think there's something really questionable with how much weight we put into polls, but at the same time, there's something very human about it. I'm sure, I don't know how many of you guys think about this, but I certainly end up in a lot of these conversations where people want to know who's ahead, who's winning, and that's just, there's something very human about it, and maybe it's something we need to kind of push down in ourselves and not think about so much, because there's some really bad effects of that. I mean, it's a big groupthink thing, right? Where everybody wanting to kind of go along with the herd, but then there's this moment, I think, where it becomes incredibly unhealthy, like this past week, where there's all these questions about when you release a poll, and if it shows your candidate ahead, and people thinking, oh, okay, I might not need to feel the urgencies to get out to the polls, but then something comes out 3 days ahead that shows it really tight. And okay, now for some reason, this is the only time that we actually feel activated to need to do this. That's something that I wish that we could, just be a little bit more civically engaged to do. But it's a reality. I think we have to deal with it. Yeah.
Even when the poll showed Beshear one time at 16%.
Yeah, 16. It was same Emerson, right?
Beshear was consistent on Facebook. He would always say, Politico or somebody says this is going to be an extremely tight race. And he did not steer away from that line. And, I'll give him kudos to the campaign that he ran. It was a pretty good campaign. He started out using a page from McConnell's handbook, painting his opponent negatively. And he painted Cameron with Matt Bevin, who's remains unpopular in the state.
So let's kind of go back, not to dwell on the past, but 2019 was sort of an interesting sort of watermark, I think, for a lot of us insiders who are paying attention, trying to anticipate certain turnout modeling, certain performance metrics. So what are some key takeaways if we use 2019 and how Governor Beshear performed in that cycle, sort of the landscape at that time? Since then, in 2022, Republicans are now the majority, right, of registrations. So even fast forward 4 years, and then we saw the performance of last night. Like, what are some key notable takeaways that we need to kind of be aware of when you do those two comparisons?
Comparing the two,
19 and
the two elections. Well, then he was running against an incumbent. I was talking to someone here earlier today about how hard it is to run against an incumbent, even if the incumbent was unpopular, and he won by 0.4%.
that's right. Yep,
percent,
0.4%.
Very narrow. So he's definitely increased his margin. Cameron, if you told me 20 years ago there would be a black man running for governor of Kentucky and he's Republican, I would have thought, no, I'm not going to live long enough, to see that happen. And it did happen, which is good. And but the difference is this time Beshear had the incumbency, and there's a lot of power in that. The supermajority in the House and Senate, they can get their way on legislation, but the governor still exerts a lot of power. They have people back home, the legislators do, that they want appointed to certain panels, and the governor has the power of appointment. He picks all the cabinet secretaries, and so they run all the cabinets. So it is still an extremely important position, and maybe we'll get into this later. I don't give advice because my advice is free. I'm not up there in the Skipper Martin range of advice. But I think there's some things that this Governor Beshear and the legislature can do that could benefit all of Kentucky and maybe change their strategies in a little way, but we'll get to that later.
Another thing to pay attention to is initial results show that turnout was significantly lower than it was in 2019. And Cameron had so many. And we got these numbers in this story. He had about 80,000 fewer votes than Bevin did.
Mm-hmm.
Beshear also had fewer votes than he got in 2019 as well. So it's overall like 120,000 fewer Kentuckians went out to vote this time around. And I don't know why that is. I mean, it's just off-year elections are strange. Maybe there's something particularly motivating about Matt Bevin in 2019 that got people out there, or maybe there was something that was not exciting Republicans to show up for Daniel Cameron this time around, which that does seem to be the case. So just in the total number of people who actually ended up showing up. But in terms of the path from then till now, and I don't know if this gets to some of the turnout questions that you're asking, but I think how Beshear pulled it off is really attempting to have this. And I think he pulled off this bipartisan aura throughout most of his first term. And sure, there's plenty of partisans who disagree with Beshear's policies, but I think on balance, as a lot of Kentuckians view him and approach him, one, through a really critical part of the coronavirus pandemic, just kind of appearing on TV in a way that I don't think people were necessarily thinking about his political party, and then throughout the disasters. There were so many things like that just provided some continuity there. And then even he's always shown great ability in leaning out of some of the social issues. He was very good at this in 2019, where Matt Bevin really couldn't make the abortion issue stick to Beshear at all. And if anything, he went on offense, but in the slightest way this year on that. Just one specific issue on exceptions for rape and incest in cases of abortion to Kentucky's abortion ban. And I think that that's going to be the thing that I think Democrats trying to be successful in the South are going to be trying to replicate, is how do we try and achieve that nonpartisanness, because the Democratic brand has gotten very, very toxic across much of the South. And Beshear's really been able to lean out of that pretty well.
One other thing I want to say about Daniel Cameron, Daniel took a risk. The flight plan was for him to be Attorney General again, and then McConnell supposedly would take care of him and maybe replace McConnell whenever he steps aside in Washington. I think that was the game plan everybody was talking about. But he took a risk and veered from that plan and said, I think I can run for governor. The story really hasn't come out. What McConnell said, his reaction, that story. You hear rumors, this is just a rumor, that Mrs. Cameron wasn't crazy about going to Washington with a baby and another baby on the way next year, we learned. And so Cameron, took that risk. I still think he's only 35 and got socks that old, little Bob Hope joke.
He's 37, isn't he?
Okay, yeah, but he has who knows about his political future, or will he be running for elective office, or will he be looking for a judgeship or a U.S., attorney position, something like that, where he would stay in Kentucky.
Would he end up being on a slate of Republican candidates that the Republican Party would pick in case of a vacancy for a Senate office in Kentucky?
I think right now, they'd have to pick three, he would be up there, and it would be interesting with Bashir picking.
Yeah.
See how that would run. So, Daniel took a risk in politics. You take a risk. You take a risk in life, and it didn't pay off for him.
So I'm kind of curious of your all sort of take and what you were able to witness during the election cycle. Just the influx of cash was record setting, right? We're talking about, last account I made was like north of $65 million in collective spending. We've never seen anything like that in this state. If you look at the individual candidates, Governor Beshear had a 5-time cash advantage over General Cameron. And so I know people don't like to embrace it, but money matters in politics, right? And so what were you all seeing on the ground regarding how expenditures were being made, where investments were being made, were there sophisticated turnout, GOTV efforts by the candidates? What did you all see? How was the money being spent that pushed voters?
From what I know, it's the advertising spending part of it, which was huge and significant, and really the outside spending, the PAC spending, is something that actually kept Daniel Cameron pretty equal on similar footing to Beshear, at least money wise. Although this is something I learned this year, didn't realize, but PAC spending, it's actually a lot more expensive to buy TV ads than your cold hard cash from a campaign, and so there is a factor there that Beshear just has an advantage by having all of that fundraising coming from inside the state. This doesn't really get into the geo. I'm not sure exactly how it was spent on get out the vote efforts, but but one other thing I'll note is something that I noticed in breaking down everything that came in just towards the campaigns this year, is how well Beshear was doing outside of the traditional Democratic fundraising zones, that he was actually outperforming Cameron in a lot of parts of rural Kentucky, especially in Appalachia. And sure, a lot of that goes along with the power of incumbency and being a governor and fundraising. That happens, but it was still, there's a question that gets raised, which is, okay, but you're doing well financially. Does this ever translate politically? Will this actually pay off? And it really did. I haven't totally overlaid the maps yet, but he did well in a lot of the same areas that he was doing well fundraising politically. So again, this gets back to he's doing something that Democrats in Kentucky, statewide Democrats, have not really been able to pull off here.
I say that Beshear started off really well. He ran a great campaign. But I think the last week, Daniel Cameron's campaigns ads got much better. I think the one where he started off with saying, the Beshear's a nice enough.
He's a nice guy.
He's a nice enough guy. How do you beat up on Mr. Rogers? The ad, you watch a little bit more, it gets a little nastier, and it shows that photo. I think my colleague Daniel DeRocher, when it was a Fairness Day at the Capitol,
right?
There were some people dressed.
The lady, Order of Perpetual Indulgence.
They were dressed up differently, and Daniel saw them there, and they went over to the governor and they just took a quick picture. And I said, Daniel, we'll see that picture again
Oh,
someday.
that picture's made the rounds,
Yep.
over the years.
And so,
Yeah.
he used it and that was a strong appeal to evangelical Christians. And I think that it was a good campaign strategy.
But again, like back to this point, for some reason, Bashir was, I think at least in this election, was able to rise above that with a lot of people. And I don't know, like we can break it down, and maybe everybody who'd have an issue with that just stayed in their own camp. But it still seems that there's a lot of people who might otherwise vote for a Republican to not vote for a Republican this time.
But yeah, it's money. It still amazes me, some of the down ticket races. You see these really good people, and they want to do well for the state, and nobody's ever heard of them. You know,
Yeah.
and they, without the money, they're probably not going to win. They won't win.
Switching gears a little bit, if you look at ballot performance based off of recent counts that I looked at this morning, the top vote getter this time around is different than 19. Allison Ball, then running re-election treasurer, now she's auditor, but Secretary of State Michael Adams, running for re-election this time around, is the top vote getter. Interesting. Thoughts?
Democrats helped him out.
Yeah, Democrats definitely helped him out. And he started campaigning on that, or at least subtly kind of campaigning on it. He would have Bashir in some of his campaign ads, and I don't know, just a lot of earned media too, like earned media that's talking about his bipartisanness, because he's leaning into a lot of these the election reform bills, but and then really going out on his own. And I think this is one of the most remarkable things about Michael Adams as a statewide Republican official, going out of his way to tamp down kind of wild accusations of election fraud after the 2020 election and since then. And he knew that there would be a lot of people in his party who'd be angered by it, but he leaned into it. And I don't think he lost a heck of a lot of people in his own party, and he picked up a few others from Democrats who I think really appreciated what he's done. And I'll say, like, something I've always noted to myself is that goes back even before 2020. In 2019, when Matt Bevin was kind of flirting with going to a real hard election recount, which like kind of shifts that whole apparatus to the legislature to kind of decide.
Right.
There was this recanvass where Allison Grimes was still Secretary of State. She brought in Mike Adams to kind of, let's do this jointly, this little thing of bipartisanship. And Adams came out and he's like, I want everybody to just know this. And like, specifically to you Republicans, like this was straightforward. Like this election was straightforward. There wasn't any funny business here. And like from the beginning, he kind of took that political risk. And I think that as the state's top election official, it's really important on these sorts of issues.
Michael Adams, he's an election walk. If you like talking elections, he's a great guy. But I noticed last night in his speech, he talked about working together, bipartisan efforts, and they did things like the early voting and made it easier for us to vote during the COVID pandemic. And then he started talking about these other big, broad issues. And if we do that, we can do that on public safety and the quality of life in Kentucky and our long-term future. And Al Cross picked up on this. He was on KET. He said, did anybody hear a little bell ring when he was talking about that? Maybe Mr. Adams last night was thinking about 2027 governor's race.
And if I remember right, he did kind of flirt with running for AG this last time around.
He did.
And he decided ultimately not to do that.
Yeah.
There were some other interesting, I think, takeaways from the down ballot. Probably don't have time to get to all of them, but kind of here based at home in Louisville. So you had State Representative Pamela Stevenson, the Democratic nominee for Attorney General, based in West Louisville, has a military background, JAG Corps, and then Russell Coleman, now AG-elect. He currently lives in Crestwood, has Western Kentucky roots, but any sort of takeaways that you will notice throughout that race? I noticed, for instance, that was, aside from the governor's race, that was probably the more cash heavy, if you will, of the down ballot tickets. Got, some outside support from the Democratic and Republican attorneys, general associations, respectively. But any other thoughts of that race and the outcome?
The two things. Unfortunately for Pam Stevenson, the first big story about her during the campaign was a Courier Journal story about how she had not gotten her law degree with the Kentucky. She has her law degree, but it being approved by the Kentucky Bar Association. That was a mistake. That was totally uncalled for. She should have caught at the campaign, and I think that wasn't a good way to be introduced.
And yeah, I think that everybody became very familiar with that very quickly. It was just that rose to the top of kind of salience for people pretty quickly.
And she understands she's a really good lawyer. She was
and
a
long
JAG,
career in
but how
as a
could you
military lawyer.
overlook something like that? Duh.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that was to just it's really hard for some of these down ballot races to get off the ground. I would actually kind of going back to Mike Adams, I think that's one that more people did pay attention to, and it's kind of unusual to get so many people interested in that. But I think a lot of it is just chalking it up to a lot of the oxygen in the room sucked up by the governor's campaign, and then down ballot people. It just kind of, I think, reverts a little bit back to some of Kentucky's state electoral trends, and just anybody with a D next to their name really gets buried by the other party.
One thing I like to say about the down ticket winners last night, all the Republicans, you wonder, okay, which one's going to come after Beshear, the governor? Okay, and I think we have two prospective people who'll be doing that. Still don't know about Russell Coleman, how he's going to manage the office. He'll be more focused on, law and order, or going after Beshear politically.
I wonder. I mean, and I wonder about that. I feel like Russell Coleman's career has really evolved a lot over the last 10 years or something. Because I first became familiar with him when he was working with the Kentucky Smart on Crime Coalition, which is kind of a criminal justice reform group, and it is not that anymore.
Yeah, and then I think Allison Ball, she was state treasurer. She's the most enthusiastic candidate I've ever seen. Ball is a good word, bouncing all over the place. And she's done a good job as treasurer. A lot of people, including me, think the office should be abolished. It's not really needed. But she's done a good job in it. She's going to be the auditor, and that's going to give her a chance to just investigate any program that she wants to. I really thought our current auditor, Mark Harmon, he announced back in the summer that he was going to do an audit on Governor Beshear's disaster relief funds.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, we'll see that before Election Day.
Yeah, and she said that she wants to continue that. This is one of the first things she wants to do, and also audit JCPS, which would immediately get her a little bit more name recognition.
Yeah, she has been in an office, administrative, and here she has a chance to exert herself and stand out more politically. So I think we're going to see what Coleman does, a relationship with the governor's office, and what Allison Ball does.
Yeah, I'd like to dive into that too, Jack, regarding just executive powers, right? So during COVID, we saw a lot of legal challenges and a lot of tension between the legislative and executive branch, right, over executive authority. Moving forward with, Beshear next 4 years, supermajorities in the House and Senate, we got a couple Republicans in key instead of essentially investigatory type of roles. What kind of, tension or divide do you all expect? We got a budget session coming up, some hot button issues I'm sure are on the horizon. Thoughts there of how Beshear may be able to get some stuff done or maybe not?
The big issue I keep, last night the national media stayed up to 2 o'clock watching how they analyzed all this, is abortion. I've been covering this almost 50 years, and it still is the most contentious issue. And so now, how ironic Republicans all these years were saying, we got to get rid of Roe versus Wade, and now they seem to have the upper hand in it, and now Democrats are using that against Republicans because people, the ad of that young girl, Beshear used, of being pregnant when she was young, and the couple whose child in the womb had no brain. And it's really tough to say, that a 12-year-old should carry that child full term. and it is a very emotional issues. I've heard debate on both sides that would make you cry, and powerful. But the sentiment seems to be not a total ban on abortions, that there have to be some kind of exceptions. That seems the way the political movement, to me, is going now.
I feel like on a national scale, and to a certain extent on a statewide scale, we just saw that. Yes, I think that's totally right. But I think when it comes down to legislative districts, I'll believe it when I see it. Because it's still really hard for me to imagine a Republican or most Republicans in the legislature going out of their way to support adding exceptions to rape and incest, like to Kentucky's abortion ban, and not really being worried about the political repercussions about it
I
during a
agree.
primary.
It won't happen. It won't happen in 2024.
Yeah.
But here's free advice to the Democrat: they need to get some candidates for the legislature, and then if they win, a few seats like that, and maybe abortion was an issue, and then you do that for a few cycles, then I think it will be.
I think otherwise, talking about the governor's powers, something I'm curious to see, and I don't know if will happen, is, of all the referenda there are, a governor's election is one of the greatest of just, okay, what do the majority of voters think about the direction of the state? And, they really signed off on this Democratic governor being in office 4 more years. Does that change at all how Republicans operate or work with the governor at all in the legislature? I really don't think so, at least on on an open political level. I wonder if there are some more, when we're talking about state budget type things, that maybe there's some room there, but I only imagine they're going to lean even farther into kind of the clipping his powers type rhetoric. But
Yeah,
that's
I know.
my
This
theory.
is my wish. It's, it probably won't happen, but I'd like to see both sides give a little bit. I would like to see Andy Beshear start inviting legislators, but the legislative leaders of the Senate Republicans and the House Republicans over to the mansion, use the mansion more, wine and dine them, and then call other individual Western Kentucky caucus, the Northern Kentucky caucus, and reach out a little bit more and maybe inform legislative leaders. Don't tell my editor I ever said this. That the governor tells the legislative leaders before he tells the media. Okay, I lost my license to be recorded. And he needs, if he was willing to do that, but maybe it's too far gone. And then I think the legislature, on the other hand, okay, stop, fix our schools, work on something besides curbing the powers of the governor and being obsessed with that as they have been in some.
Yeah.
And they need to, and both sides need to do that, but we'll probably have the stories that they're at loggerheads.
It's going to be really hard. I mean, what is the conversation going to be like when that bill comes up? To, I don't know, clip another thing, move another thing, another power under the Attorney General office from the governor's office. What's that conversation going to be like now? And I do feel like it might be a little different because it'll immediately be like, wait a second, didn't just a majority of Kentuckians vote for this?
But there
guy?
are some who
But
still
just go forward with
despise Andy Beshear.
Oh yeah.
They're really strong. I won't name him, but I know one whose son didn't get a federal appointment.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well, and I think there was some social media back and forth this morning where a certain floor leader, was making some statements, maybe alluding to some resistance of wanting to sit at the same table as the governor. And so I guess more to come, right? They gavel on the second or the first Tuesday after the first Monday, so January 2nd, and we'll see it all on full display. But looking ahead, so Beshear, a Democrat, in a red state, in a southern red state, what does that say nationally? What is the future sort of star power of Andy Beshear?
I think there's a lot there, and as we speak, there, national, political figures and advisors are trying to unpack that sauce. Like how is he able to pull that off? And And really, I do think that there's a lot for Democrats to learn to try and achieve something like that in other places. But in terms of him personally, yeah, I mean, he said that he wouldn't drop out of this term to say run for Senate, but
Unless
those
the nation
promises,
calls him,
the nation calls him.
Okay.
Promises have been broken before. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of when somebody's trying to either build a ticket or come up with a new person to, new face for the National Democratic Party, or even thinking about when you're building a cabinet. Both, Andy's kind of been in those conversations before, as was Steve Beshear before him. And I think that this is, and he's pretty young. Like, he's got a lot of years ahead of him. There's a lot more shots at trying to pull that off.
Yeah, he's hot politically and nationally. But I was thinking, driving over here from Shelbyville, I wonder what the forum's going to be talking about a year from now, after next year's election, when the presidential, and how much more we will know, and looking at things, how much things will change. And to me, right now, it looks like, today it's going to be Biden versus Trump again. But that could change by tomorrow morning. And just how fluid all that is. And I think if Biden, for some reason, or if the Democrats say, look, Joe, you can't win, if we should tell him something like that, there'll be a cavalry charge of candidates, of Democrats looking for that seat. And if they get somebody like Taylor Swift, that they could win it.
So thank you both. Let's jump into some audience questions. We have Louisville Forum board members Ron and Lourdes. And Lourdes, we'll go ahead and tee you up with the first question.
Okay. You've actually answered quite a few questions every time as you speak. I'm folding my questions and putting them behind me, so thank you. So to generalize some of the questions I've gotten is the down ballot winners received more votes individually than the governor did. Mm-hmm. What is your assessment of that? For example, not just Mike Adams, but Mark Metcalf got more votes than the governor did, winning. So what is your assessment of that? And the second thing is that there are some who say that Governor Beshear is the most Republican of Democrat candidates because he moved to the center on trans rights, he moved to the center on abortion, he moved to the center on tax policy, for example. So he saved himself from getting shot from the right, but also shot from the left.
First, I want to say a conflict of interest here. I like Lourdes. I've known her for a long time. So, however, she may not like my answers. The first one about the down ticket, what my reaction to that would be, I would want to go back and check and see if that held true in past elections, or was this something brand new before I made any conclusion on that. I'd want to do some research. And if I found out it was true, then I'd have a story. But if the same thing has been happening the last 3 or 4 governor's race, it's ho-hum city. Okay? My answer on that.
I mean, I think the kind of boring math response to that is just, well, it was a more competitive race at the top of the ticket. Even Beshear won by 5 percentage points, but still it was kind of it's closer to an even share of the votes than the down ballot. It was really a blowout at every other one, with the Republicans beating their Democratic opponents there. So I think that's part of it. And
I don't have a, if somebody changes, a politician changes his or her position on an issue, your opponent will say they flip-flopped or waffled. So that doesn't upset me, that much, mentioning any changes Beshear did. I think Cameron changed his position on abortion during the campaign. So.
And I think that for the political part of it, I mean, I think that's a little bit of what's in that roadmap for how a Democrat might win in an increasingly Republican state like Kentucky, is they have to moderate their views on something like this. And it's not only that, but like Democratic voters like the actual ones and say more liberal ones being okay with that, and getting back to the politics of it all. Of all right, this is a candidate who maybe isn't everything that I want, but it's more that I want than the other guy or gal. That's something I think that's lost on a lot of I don't know. I hate to say this, younger folks, like people in my generation. We can be a little bit.
Thank you.
We can be a little bit absolutist about some issues and we say things like, "Oh, I don't want to just have to pick between the lesser of two evils." But that's the point, actually, isn't it? Like you want less evil than more evil, and not to like disparage any candidate as evil, but like that's kind of our binary choice in our representative democracy. We have to make decisions like that.
Ron?
Thank you. As Iris mentioned, the national media took a great deal of interest in our governor's race, which was very interesting to a lot of our members, and it kind of raised two core questions for them. The first being, what does this say to you about our current governor's possibilities of future federal positions? And the second being, did the national media make too many inferences about what Kentucky's 2023 governor's race says about a 2024 presidential race, or was this more of a specific Kentucky race?
Well, no, I defend the media all the time. Okay, so when they made a lot about the Kentucky race last night, given what happened in Ohio on abortion, and abortion was a big issue in this governor's race, I think that was fair game to comment on that, and might propel Andy Beshear to the national stage. He might have a better chance getting on the national stage by being a candidate for vice president, or should I dare even say, president. Who thought Jimmy Carter, when he was governor, would be president someday? So, who knows? Yeah.
I think that there's some one of the problems is only analyzing Kentucky's race through the lenses of these policy issues, and saying that this tells us something about the rest of the nation. It tells us a little bit for sure, but there's this huge mitigating factor, which is again this Beshear X factor, and a lot of that I will again chalk up to like incredibly high name recognition. His dad was governor 8 years ago, and has been involved in politics since the mid 70s. It's just like that is something that again, like doing the national political analysis just doesn't account for, I think. But I think we like Jack said, like we do learn some things about some of those issues, and I think we have learned a little bit about abortion, and he did again that move was something nobody else has done for the kind of Southern Democratic officials, or at least has been able to pull it off successfully without it like being nuclear for their campaign. But I think also there's something a little bit to be learned about the fading effectiveness of the Trump endorsement. I'm sure that it helps a little bit with some folks, and and especially in a primary election, it's probably where it helps more than anywhere else. But it certainly isn't something that carried him over the line, and didn't for Matt Bevin in 2019 either. It's a lesson I think that has been written for the last while, and I think some folks would be smart to read a little bit deeper.
Would you allow me to retract a statement I made? I said I would always defend the media. Not always. There's some media I just never could defend.
Is that the end of that statement, or?
Yeah, it is.
Lourdes, go ahead.
Okay, so here's another combo question. Would you please explain the impact of the abortion question on the results of the governor's race versus the down ballot races? And did it have anything to do with the PACs, some PACs accusing Daniel of radical liberal, agenda?
Yeah. Oh, it always made me wonder when you have an ag commissioner candidate, and I like Jonathan Shell a lot, talking about abortion and his campaign, and why do we need to know the state treasurers, we can ask that position, but I've never seen the state treasurer, really involved in abortion. But, the politicians, the consultants, they know just how tough this issue is and how people get really sometimes just lose, rational thought about it and trying to do what's the best thing. And I'm in a Sunday school class that the arguments are, I'm an evangelical Christian. And sometimes, we have good discussions, and I think it's healthy, about some of these issues.
How abortion played into the down ballot races, essentially the question. Again, I think notable that it gets brought up everywhere. I think it's a litmus test that a lot of voters expect, and they want to know where their candidates feel about that. I do kind of question the importance of that, and at least with those specific offices. Maybe a bit of it is as a testing ground, like in thinking of them as a rising star within the party, and you want to make sure that they have the right answer on this before they go through the gate. But again, I attribute a lot of it's really hard to get people informed and interested in what's going on in down ballot races, and I hate to be really cynical about that, but so much of that depends on, I think, on larger forces of where voters are heading in a state, and if there's ever like any coattails to follow on. That's the other effect, which we're not any coattails this time around.
That's right. Ron?
There were quite a few questions about Daniel Cameron, some specific, some general. In the specific, there was a question about if you make any inferences or reach any conclusions about the fact that Mr. Cameron did not reference Donald Trump in his concession speech, and in the general, with him being young but now sort of in between positions, putting on your Nostradamus hats, what do you see as the future politically for Daniel Cameron?
Yeah, as far as the concession speech, I would ask him, did you forget Mr. Trump, or did you deliberately? I'd want to know the answer from him, what he thought. And I'd leave it open until I asked him on that.
I mean, the thing that it reminds me of is how after Matt Bevin lost in 2019, one of his campaign advisors went and just dragged Bevin about saying that Trump was the only reason he got that close to Bashir in the election, and he almost dragged him over the line. And so, I mean, there's just this treatment you get, I think, when you are a losing candidate and you affiliate yourself with Trump in any way. And I kind of think of that as you just don't want to have that name in your mouth on that day, because if it gets to him, he's just going to decide to start tweeting something.
And what was your last part, the question?
Just your general outlooks, predictions on the future for Daniel Cameron in politics.
35 years age, very bright, very smart man. And I think he has a good political future. Again, as I said earlier, I don't know if it'll be in elective politics or it'll be in some appointive position in politics. I don't know. Do you know? Do you know? We don't know.
I don't know if there's lots of opportunities for lawyers out there. There's jobs, but yeah, in terms of the politics,
Yeah, can do that. He's got two babies.
right?
Right.
And I mean, there's a lot of options
the
out
job.
there. I don't like whether it's running for Senate in a while, or if there's something closer. But
But he's a
out
smart
of-
man. Even I said he took these risks and didn't follow the flight plan. We thought it must have crossed his mind, and it should every candidate. What happens if I lose? Publicly you're going to win, right up to the last. But you got to take that in consideration, and I'd give Daniel. I'm sure he thought about that a lot, and he knows.
Lourdes?
Looking ahead, what happens now to Governor Beshear's agenda moving forward, especially with the 2024 General Assembly and the budget coming up?
Okay, two things he's really talked about. 11% pay raise for teachers ain't going to happen. But this is where I think the legislature could give a little bit. said that Bashir should welcome the mansion more to them. I think if the legislature went back to where they gave teachers, school personnel, a set salary, a salary increase, like 5%, 8%, whatever. What they have been doing under Bashir is saying, well, we're giving more money to the school districts, and the school districts can decide what the pay raises should be for the teachers. They're closer to the teachers. No, they're avoiding. I did a story for the Kentucky Lantern, and I'll give a plug for that. It's free. Go Kentucky Lantern and subscribe to it. It's a feisty little online publication. Deborah writes for it. But I think that the studies show that most teachers got a 5% raise, in some school districts at 8% by the legislature giving money to the school districts. But there were some teachers, especially in Eastern Kentucky, maybe got a 2%, 1%, raise. So I think it should be uniform across the state. The legislature should stop penalizing teachers. I'll say that. I'm not running for anything. They should stop penalizing teachers by designating a salary for them. And it won't be as high as Bashir's 11%, but I think if they went back that way, and they might have a chance of courting teachers better the next time.
Yeah, I think a lot of the room is that within the budget somewhere, and finding opportunities to work with Republican legislators on those issues, and because ultimately they want to look good too to their constituents, and I think there's a lot of overlapping interests there, and really that's where a lot of the I think that already there is like the Bashir and the legislature do work together on those things. They don't like to talk about it.
Right.
It's almost like they have an agreement, like, hey, let's we'll agree on this, but publicly let's just like go at each other's throats. And then I think the other part of that is just continuing to go after economic development projects. I mean, things that do not require legislative approval, or either are so sweet that you can get legislative approval pretty easily. So if you need funding for some large economic development grant, that's something that he's been able to find some success with them.
The legislature also should look at Bashir wants this universal pre-kindergarten, that all the kids would go to that. And I think the legislature should give that serious thought.
Yeah, that was something that was a non-starter a couple of years ago.
Yep. Yeah. And we'll have more of this working together that Michael Adams wants.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Ron, go ahead.
So for the political junkie, now that we're past this cycle, have we seen people that we look at as rising stars as we look ahead to the next governor of Kentucky?
So who's going to run for Kentucky governor 4 years from now? Okay, Democrats, you got Rocky Adkins, you got Jacqueline Coleman. I think those two are going to be up there at the top. Anybody else on the Democrats come to mind?
The bench is real thin on the Democratic side.
Yeah, there's a young state senator, help me with his name, Democrat, liberal, David?
David Yates?
David Yates. Yeah.
He's from here.
I don't know that much about him, but he seems like he's going to make a move.
I think he's trying to. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, you've got some Democrats, and I think it'll be interesting to see the relationship of Rocky and Jacqueline Coleman these next 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about Rocky Adkins in 2019 during the primary, like, to what extent that he would be able to challenge Bashir in that primary, and he held his own. But that's again going, what's the secret sauce for a Democrat to be competitive in an increasingly conservative state, or at least an increasingly Republican state? And Rocky still has a lot of relationships in Eastern Kentucky and has been part of this Bashir apparatus that's really been able to keep in touch and keep connected with a lot of communities outside of Kentucky's urban areas. Republican side, I mean, I imagine Daniel Cameron will still be in that
Yeah,
conversation.
another Democrat I'll throw out there is Coleman Eldridge. He's the state Democratic Party chair. He wants to run for something. I don't know what that will be, if he's looked at high as the governor. For Republicans who would run, I would be surprised if Daniel ran again for
If
governor.
he hasn't
But
announced
he certainly would have to be on your list
Yeah.
as a perspective, because.
Yeah, Jonathan Shell, new agriculture commissioner, possibly if unless he's not wanting to jump ship at that point.
Allison Ball, we
Ball,
mentioned her.
Russell. I mean, yeah, the constitutional officers are all like kind of they've built names for themselves.
Yeah, especially the Attorney General's office and Lieutenant Governor seems to be the springboard for governor. I can't think of any treasurer since Honest Dictate absconded with $250,000.
Never seen again.
We have time for one more quick question.
The question about ads that, for example, when Daniel's PACs tried to draw a contrast with trans or abortion, did that blow back on Daniel? And then the flip side of that is many observers found the radio ads about Daniel himself, calling him Uncle Daniel, racist and very base. How does that play, and how does that speak toward the political discourse moving forward?
Run that last part, Bobby, again.
The ad, and I believe it was a radio ad, that talked about Daniel as Uncle Daniel, and that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yes, that many
That was from
thought
a
was very
PAC.
racist.
That was a PAC ad.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
That was a PAC ad.
And how do you have political discourse with?
That's tough. That was totally uncalled for. The Uncle Daniel statement. You know, haven't we gotten better than that? Yeah, and so, but as for I think the abortion ads, though, that Bashir had, you know, they were effective, and the young girl, you know, talking
And I think
about
they're
abortion.
effective and uncomfortable, but without being offensive.
Because
I
we
think
have
is
a
the
cousin
thing.
like that, you know, we have a niece like that, all of us. It hits home, it gets personal.
What was the other part of the question, Sancy Ads?
The race thing,
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the Until Freedom supported group. Yeah, that was a hard one. And I think that one that I don't know. I wonder to what extent it was able to get people out to the polls and get people's attention. But yeah, where have we gotten with political discourse? Yeah, it's pretty bad. People are willing to pull the nuclear option at every turn. The other part of the question, when you were asking about the I guess the effectiveness of the anti-trans ads, and that's something I've kind of wondered about, is to what extent is this really something that gets people super motivated to come out to the polls? And I kind of wonder that. I wonder if this election shows that it is not the big effective issue that everybody thought it would be, and Republicans really have poured a lot of political treasure into this, both at the legislative level and elsewhere. And I mean, here's an example of, and Kelly Craft did that in the primary race too. And it's not something that I think really it's not front of mind for a lot of voters. And yeah, and so I wonder why it continues to be leaned in as like the number one issue when.
on racism, I don't think we should sugarcoat racism. You know, it's still out there. We like to think we're better, and there have been tremendous improvements since I was an usher at the Russell Theater in Maysville and had to tell black people, you know, the colored section was upstairs and the white downstairs. I thought that's the way the world was. But we've improved, and we still need a lot of work done. And I got a call last night at the Bureau from anonymous caller. They're always and he said, "Hey, did you see Daniel Cameron kiss that white woman on TV last night?" I said, "Buddy, it was his wife." So it's still out there. I don't want to sugarcoat it.
Well, on behalf of Louisville Forum, lose my voice, sorry. Please thank you.